Alright, in the next patch, the event experts are going to be pretty stacked. So let's go over who you should summon and who you should skip. I'll also be going over Metadrew, whether you should go for additional resonance or not, because this is going to be the last day you can get his resonance. Alright, for the first week, we have Yuuhime and Ahmed. Ahmed at this point is really bad, not really usable in any of the contents, be it PvE or PvP. Even though he is the only unit in the game that can heal up max HP capacity, the rest of his kit is not good enough to warrant you running him in one of your team. So at this point, Ahmed is an easy skip. Yuuhime on the other hand has both PvE and PvP uses. Aside from being good in the Calamity Island, she's also really good in False Auto Fantasy for Forbiter in specific, not so much for Counter Sonica and Dark Starlord, and you're going to be running her in this team right here. The reason why she is really good in this team is because she's going to be pairing up with Mateo, and when she pairs up with Mateo, every single time Mateo takes a turn, she's going to gain 100% AP from that. But keep in mind, she will only be usable in Forbiter if you have her at R6. Without her R6, she pretty much has no use in PvE at all. So if you want to make her work in PvE, especially in Forbiter, you need to get her R6. Now, is it worth it to get her R6 just to make her work in Forbiter? I would say it is, because this team alone can score you about 260 million by itself. The difference between having an R6 Yuuhime versus not having an R6 Yuuhime in Forbiter is about 100 million. In PvP, however, she does not need any resonance. R0 works just fine as R6, especially with her leader skill. In most cases, when you're running Moriyama, you want to move first, so her leader skill plays a very big role, and you don't need any resonance for her to work. So for Yuuhime, you summon for her R6 if you want to do well in Forbiter, and if you only want to use her for PvP, you can just go for R0 and just stop there. Week 2, we have Chu Yao and Gaius. I mean, obviously at this point, Gaius has zero use in the game. No use in PvE, no use in PvP. You should 100% skip Gaius at this point. Chu Yao, on the other hand, has remained one of the best support for PvE and in PvP. And in PvE, he mainly shines in False Auto Fantasy when you run him with Sloan. So he's going to be used for all 3 of the bosses. For Forbiter, you're going to be running him in this team right here. For Sonica, pretty much the same team along with Sloan. And lastly, for Dark Starlord, again, the same team as well. Outside of False Auto Fantasy, he has fallen off a little bit in other areas like Ritual Miracle and DISLYTE Lens, but his spot in False Auto Fantasy is going to be solidified for pretty much forever. He's just way too good with the defense break and also Seer in one skill for both his S1 and S3, and also the assist mechanic that he has with his Spirit Aegis buff. So when it comes to his resonance, his R2 is going to be perfect for all of the PvE areas that you want to be running him in. The rest of his resonance is not really needed for PvE at all. In PvP, however, his R6 makes a very big difference, especially when you're going up against a Momo or a Moriyama or even a Lian, right? To reduce the shield. Now, the reason why his R6 is really good against like Momo and Moriyama is because of the attack lower. And this is really huge if you are using your own Moriyama, because Moriyama's damage comes from whether he has higher attack than the enemy or not. And if your Chu Yao can reduce the level 70 Momo's attack, it will be easier for your Moriyama to one-shot the Momo. So when it comes to Chu Yao in PvE, his R0 is a must-have. His R2 is really good for PvE, and the rest of his resonance is not really needed. For PvP, however, his R6 does make a lot of difference. So if you want to focus on PvP, you should R6 him as well. And now for the last week, we have Feng Xun and Farrah. I'm going to go over Farrah first. There's not a lot to talk about her in PvE because she has pretty much been outshined by every other DPS. But in PvP, she made somewhat of a resurgence. For now, she's being run in the Sloan team. Although even with her minor resurgence in PvP, I don't think she's worth it to summon at all at this point. The only reason she made a resurgence in PvP is because of this buff right here. Increases the max HP by 50%. And then also when an ally tries to inflict freeze, it deals 25% of their max HP. This is the only reason why she made a resurgence. Without this buff, she would be pretty much forgotten at this point. So Farrah is going to be a skip. Now, Feng Xun. I've already gone over this guy so many times. I still believe he's one of the best support in the game, one of the best units in the game as well. His use in PvE is pretty much unlimited. Wherever you can bring him, you're going to be bringing him. He's the best support for Fafnir, where he can give you defense break on turn 1 and also buff on turn 1 as well. He's also part of the fastest team in Yinglong. He's one of the main DPS that you bring in Shadow Stream, even though he's a support. And lastly, for False Auto Fantasy, he is used alongside with Elif, and it is the best performing team ever since it got released, right? Now, in terms of his resonance in PvE, his R0 is a must-have. His R2 is really good. It's almost a must-have. His R4 is also really good because it gives him more damage, and most of his damage comes from outside of his turn. His R6 is not needed, but his R5 is pretty decent as well. If you summon for his R5, you're going to be having a lot easier time in your Yinglong runs because the first wave will depend on whether you can one-shot it or not. And having an R5 Feng Xun along with level 70 Elif will help you one-shot the wave easier. But if you can already one-shot the wave without his R5, you don't have to go for his R5. Now in PvP, I also use him against a Momo team. It's not 100% win rate, but it's a good chance to win. He's mostly just here for AP push and also the attack and crit damage buff. You need him to be at R2 for him to work in this team in specific, because you want him to provide speed buff to your allies so that they can move before the enemy Chu Yao cuts in between. But aside from his R2, the rest of his resonance does not matter. Alright, so for Feng Xun, his resonance for PvE, R0 is a must, R2 is really good, R4 is also really good, R5 is decent if you want to have a better time in your Yinglong runs, R6 is not needed. For PvP, R2 is very good, but the rest of his resonance does not matter that much. And now for the main unit, Metadrew. Should you go past his R0 or is it not worth it? I'm on my guildmate's account and he has him at R4. When it comes to Metadrew, the only PvE usage he has right now is going to be in Falsetto Fantasy and Desolate Lands. And in Falsetto Fantasy, he's only being used in Forbiter and Counter Sonica. So first off, in Forbiter, the difference between an R0 and R4 Metadrew is going to be about 5 to 10 million. So in Forbiter, it's not really that high of a difference between R0 and R4. With an R4 Metadrew, the highest I've seen is it goes up to 110 million on Sloan team. And with an R0 Metadrew, the highest I've seen is around 100 million. So 97 million right here with an R4 Metadrew, around 87 million on Sloan. You can go upwards of 110 million with this team. Now in Counter Sonica, however, the difference between an R0 Metadrew and an R4 is pretty big. It's around 20 to 30 million difference. The highest I've seen this team hit is around 185 million on Sloan alone, and the whole team hits about 190 million versus my own Metadrew, which hit around 160 million on the Sloan team. So in most runs with R4 Metadrew, your Sloan is going to be hitting around 120 million to 140 million. So the difference between R0 and R4 Metadrew in Falsetto Fantasy is about 30 to 40 million. So about 10 million in Forbiter and about 20 to 30 million in Counter Sonica. He's not being used in Dark Starlight because there's too little turns for him to work. And for Desolate Lands, his resonance does not matter at all. The place you're going to be using him is going to be Shadow Gale and Shadow Glow. And in Shadow Gale, the best DPS is going to be Eleaf. And Eleaf cannot get his effects of Burden of Duat stacks. Eleaf's passive gives her a big shield that will pretty much not expire at all during the entire run, so she cannot be damaged. And when she cannot be damaged, she cannot get the Burden of Duat stacks. His R4 and R6 is also not going to matter at all in Shadow Gale because he's not going to be dying, or you can make him die, but he's only going to be dying at most 1 to 2 times. So his R4 and R6 effect is not going to be coming into play. Now for Shadow Glow, it's slightly different because you can make use of the Burden of Duat stacks. If you put Lapis in front, she'll take enough damage to get a few Burden of Duat stacks, but it's not enough for Lapis to take all 5 of the Burden of Duat stacks. In a typical run, your Lapis is only going to be taking enough damage to get 4 stacks of the Burden of Duat, so his R2 is also not going to matter. And in Shadow Glow, you don't want him to die because you want him to give his S1 increased stats to your Lapis, which means his R4 and R6 is also not going to be useful at all in Shadow Glow. And in PvP, he's also not the best. There are some teams that can make him work, and the only reason why he works really well in PvP right now is because in Knockout there is a buff that works very well with him, which is this buff right here, Divine Shield. Allied Asper gains 1 extra revival opportunities, and each revival grants them an extra 10. With this buff right here, he works really well, especially in a Suicide team, and you can stack up his passive really fast. His R6 is going to be very good for this team in specific, but it only really works for Knockout. It doesn't really work that well in B-Bout or in Point War, so in PvP he's not really the best. So when it comes to Metadrew in PvE and in PvP, all you really need is for him to be at R0. His R2 and R4 does add a little bit for Falsetto Fantasy, but in my opinion, it's not really worth it to go for his resonance, especially when Meta Era is about to be released. Meta Era could potentially remove Metadrew from Falsetto Fantasy, and if that happens, his resonance will not matter at all, because the only 2 plays that he has in PvE right now that isn't Falsetto Fantasy is going to be Shadow Gale and Shadow Glow, and both of those content does not require you to have any of his resonance. And in PvP he struggles a lot. The only reason why he's good is because of the knockout rule. Outside of that knockout rule, he's pretty terrible. So when it comes to Metadrew, just get his R0 and just dip. So yeah, that's about it for all the Jaspers that you should summon and skip. I'm not going to include Meta Era in this video because I don't know how well she's going to do in PvE and PvP. Once I've tested her out, then I'll make a video on whether you should go ham on Meta Era or not. That's about it. Ciao.